Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one person or one starfish at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. It's how we get the word out. Excited for a guest today. I just met this guy, Craig. He was referred to me by my friend Anne. So I'm excited to get into his story. He wrote a good, cool book called The Darkside of Discipline, which we'll get into down the road. He sent it to me, and it's quite interesting. And so we'll definitely get into that. It's a controversial subjects there, I'm sure. But welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you so much, Angela. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So Craig, really quick, came from a personal training background, farm bred, which I resonate with because I was farm bred. Got into online fitness back when that wasn't really a thing. Started running that. That became somewhat successful. I'm gathering. Then he became an author, wrote multiple books already, which is pretty neat. Now he's into coaching all kinds of businesses, how to build this structure, how to scale using the 80-20 principles. So welcome to the show. I want to just dig into stuff. So let's go back to personal training. You said you were broke, you were socially anxious, you were, slightly introverted. Tell us, what motivated you to even do that back then? Like, why didn't you just get a job?
Well, that's a great question. So what I wanted to do when I was in high school was be a strength and conditioning coach in the National Hockey League of all things. So, I just loved playing hockey, and then, wasn't good enough to play in the pros. And then I went to university for it, and I thought the only thing I could do is actually be physically in place with people. But as an introvert, you get really drained by that, by being around people all day long. And so when I was a personal trainer, I stumbled across a couple of websites where people were posting information. I was like, I can post information too. So I started an email newsletter. And it's really funny. Like, this is how bootstrapped I was. I had an email newsletter of 3,000 people in the first 2 years of my business. I didn't know how to sell anything, so I didn't sell anything. But the 3,000 people were not kept in a database. They were kept in a Word document in groups of 50 email addresses that I sent my email newsletter out through Hotmail, one group at a time, because you could only BCC 50 people at a time in Hotmail at the time. And it took me 75 minutes to manually send out my weekly newsletter to my 3,000 people. But that was how I started until I finally figured out how to sell things, first through PayPal and eventually through more of an automated website. And really email copywriting was how I made a lot of my money early on, by creating these workout programs, just ebooks, and selling to my email list and selling other people's stuff as well.
How
Really
did you
good
get
programs.
3,000 email addresses?
Well, I just started creating content. And so in 1999, 2000, there was no other competition really. And so anybody who had an email address, and a lot of them were other university students, because I was in college because I had my master's degree at McMaster University till 2000. So I was in university a long time. So a lot of them were professors, other students, and they were sending it to other people. And they would say, hey, can you put me on the email list? So I had no opt-in or anything. There was just all through people who wanted to get my email newsletter. And that was built up over 2 years.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's all a matter of taking action, messy action, and not knowing where it's going to go.
Yeah, it's a good start. That's kind of crazy. So were your parents entrepreneurs, or
No,
where do you think
no.
that came from at all?
I have this, I even mentioned it in the book, is I think that I've always wanted to make the world play by my rules and not play by the world's rules, because I don't like doing things that normal people do. So when I work when people are not working, and I don't work when people are working, because it's just like some rebellious streak in me. And so I wanted to do things my way, and I like to write and create, and I wanted to read and write for a living. And so I found my way to doing it. But, I grew up on a farm. My parents did not have a lot of money. It was all hand-me-down clothing. My mom sewed a lot of our clothing. She probably never made more than $25,000 a year, working as a secretary at a factory. And my father, he didn't make that much money because we had a small beef cattle operation and corn and wheat and soybeans. And so there wasn't a lot of money. But my sister and I both, we were very book smart. And so we did pretty well in school, and we were able to go through university, and back when it wasn't super expensive, and we both got some scholarships and stuff, and we turned out all right. And so I don't think there was an entrepreneur in any of my direct family. My mom's brothers were truck drivers. They drove cattle around the country. And my father was really pretty much the only guy in the family. So it was just the only exposure I had was when I was 12 years old. I got my first off the farm job for $2.85 an hour, digging ditches for a local greenhouse and doing all the dirtiest, ugliest jobs you can imagine that I did for like 6 years in a row. And I worked for a really good entrepreneur, and I saw how he treated customers, and I saw how he was the first guy in, the last guy out, busy seasons, all this sort of stuff, how he treated his employees, how he was, just a really good person. And I think that rubbed off on me. And I didn't actually think that I would be an entrepreneur, because when I got through college, I was a personal trainer for somebody else. You're kind of like an independent contractor. And I was fortunate that I trained at a very wealthy gym in Toronto. So I've literally trained the richest man in Canada. I've done a personal training session for one of the Thompson family in Toronto. And, you learn a lot from these folks, but I still wasn't a full-time entrepreneur until my online business took off. And that was just really a series of um, lucky, fortunate things that came together. I wouldn't say it was all luck. I did a lot of work,
You're doing
but
the work.
I,
You just didn't know what
had
you're
the
doing.
had the internet not come along then, would I have become a copywriter sending out direct mail pieces in the mail? I don't know, maybe, but the internet made it easy for a person like me who has introverted tendencies, because you don't have to, when you do email marketing, you don't suffer the fear of rejection. It's like when you're doing outbound sales calls, someone's going to hang up on you, or door-to-door sales or whatever. Someone's going to, slam the door in your face. But if you send an email out to 10,000 people and 9,900 people, don't respond, don't buy, or maybe
Unsubscribe,
don't like
whatever.
it, nobody replies back and says, shut up. They just, delete it. But the 100 people buy. And so you get the upside of selling with email copywriting, almost no downside.
That's interesting. And then you went from there and you wrote your first book. Tell us a little bit about that and what prompted you to write it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So in 2006, before the recording started, I talked about how I had an anxiety attacks. My online business was taking off, but I was still binge drinking. Like a lot of guys from my small town, we played hockey, and we played hockey and drank beer. You drank beer, played hockey. Didn't matter which order you did it, but that's what you did. And so I had a binge drinking habit that I kept even throughout past college. And so I was binge drinking on the weekends, but being, Mr. Perfect personal trainer during the week, and that hypocritical lifestyle caught up to me. And I ended up in the ER, not just once, but twice, thinking I was having a heart attack. And one time it was like the symptoms were full blown for 6 weeks in a row. And I realized I needed to get myself together. And I started putting in systems into my life, morning routines that were very effective, boundaries around, the little bits of social media that existed in 2006 and 2007, boundaries around email, boundaries around my BlackBerry that, all of us used to have back then. And I just built the systems that allowed me to become productive. And then all these people, entrepreneurs who knew me, who were not buying my fitness stuff, but just knew me from entrepreneur events, started saying, you're the most productive person I know. How do you do it? So I started coaching people on that, in addition to coaching people on basic online marketing. And that just kind of played out for the next almost decade, until I took a whole bunch of essays I had written for this other website that I bought called earlytorise.com. It was a very successful newsletter, started the millennium, started with 2000 through 2006 and 7. And then the guy got kind of bored of it, and he sold it to me, and had a very large email list. And so I started writing these productivity newsletters, took my best content and put it into my first book, The Perfect Day Formula, which came out in 2015, late 2015. And a lot of big name people got a hold of it. Like Ed Milet recommended it, and Russell Brunson made an entire podcast about it. And today we run Facebook ads for our Millionaire Morning Routine course, featuring a quote from Russell from the podcast that he made about it. And we've been running this ad since 2020, and it's still our most effective ad to this day. And so a lot of people got behind it. And even though it was self-published, we sold probably over 100,000 copies of it. And then so I'm starting to coach people one-on-one to build structure in their days, but then also structure in their business, while also knowing some marketing. So it's a little bit of this triangle that allowed them to start making more money in less time in all types of businesses. And I had some wildly successful clients who built even $100 million businesses using some of the systems that I taught them. And obviously Russell Brunson has built a huge business, being more productive using the systems. And then I wrote Unstoppable: How to Get Through Anxiety and Build a Great Life. And then I wrote another book, which is actually my best book that we haven't talked about, because I didn't actually write it. I actually downloaded a whole bunch of audios and videos to my co-author, and he wrote the book, and everyone said it was the best book. And it's called The Perfect Week Formula. And it's really, really effective for helping people plan their week out so that they're time blocking and they're setting boundaries and making sure that they get the most important stuff done, even if they work fewer hours than they normally are right now. So that was all before 2020. And then for the last 5 years, it's really been about coaching, mastermind, like the groups, coaching stuff that I think you've attended. We have our own version, and we just get everybody together. And our friend Ann has been a part of our coaching since 2021, I think. And we help all types of businesses, from construction to financial services to online people to gym owners to people building data centers to real estate investors, all types of stuff.
That's cool. So now you wrote a recent book called The Darkside of Discipline, which I find interesting because you just talked about a bunch of structure, and that's what discipline is structure. So how in your mind is there a difference?
Yeah, so there's a dark side. It's a double-edged sword, really. And you can just take a good thing too far, which a lot of people are doing these days. And I have friends who have taken a good thing too far, doing all types of activities that, are good technically, reading a lot and exercising a lot and doing triathlons and doing bodybuilding competitions and stuff. Okay, those are all good. But if you do that at the sacrifice of what really matters, your family life, your marriage, your business, and those things are hurt or destroyed by other good things, there's a dark side to this discipline. And I've had, for a long time, when I had my introverted tendencies, I also put myself in kind of like a self-imposed prison of being rigid and disciplined. And so I was running away and chasing all these discipline things that I was good at because I was running away from the fear of rejection in relationships. And so it took me a while to find my wife. So the way that we describe it in the book is that the ultimate definition of discipline is very simple. It's identifying what your level 10 problem is in life and putting a level 10 effort into it. And everything else is just entertainment. So for me, I once had an exercise streak of 1,000 days in a row.
Right.
But big deal. Like, you don't get a gold medal or anything for exercising 1,000 days in a row. It's neither necessary nor sufficient for success. And I exercised in place of doing what really mattered. And that's what I want. It's a thinking person's book. It's for me to challenge somebody and say, okay, you're getting up at 5 a.m., you're cold plunging with your book of the week in your hand and a green juice in the other hand. And that's nice and that's good. But are these really solving the biggest problems in your life? You've got a fight with your business partner. Is this solving your fight with your business partner? Is this solving your financial struggles? Is this, solving your marriage, your 15-year-old marriage that's really just become you and your partner are roommates in the same house who shuttle kids around? Like, how are these good discipline things actually solving the level 10 problem in your life? Because if they aren't, they're just entertainment, or even worse, perverse forms of procrastination. And I've seen it happen to too many people, and I've seen it happen to myself. There's a guy named Naval Ravikant, who's a Silicon Valley investor, very famous and wealthy guy. And he says, you can't write the book until you've lived the book. And I've lived the book. I've lived the dark side of discipline, and I've swung the pendulum too far. And I want to bring it back and just say, hey, let's take a step back here. Let's first of all figure out what really matters in our life, and then run our own race and not chase other people's definitions of discipline.
This is a very good controversial subject. So, and I see where you're going with it. I like it. Um, how do you know if you've gone too far? Like, I get the general gist of what you said. What was wrong with 1,000 days for you of being at the gym? Like, I don't think that sounds like a bad thing. Good job.
Well,
Um,
so here are the downsides to it. One, first of all, you don't need to exercise 1,000 days in a row. I'm a personal trainer. I know that you can, if we talk
right.
about the
Yeah,
80-20
days off.
principle, what's that?
You're supposed to have days off, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're supposed to have days off. So you're going to get, and the 80-20 principle, which I truly believe in, is you get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. And the things that I sacrificed in order to keep up with the exercise streak, as I talk about in the book, it's like I go to Europe every summer for this entrepreneurship camp, and you fly overnight from Toronto to Munich, and then from Munich to Lithuania, which is where the camp was. And by the time you get in, it's like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it's like the entrepreneurship camp starts. So it's like, where do I exercise in this day? And so I exercised in the bathroom of the SAS lounge in Copenhagen airport. And I'm like, what am I doing? What kind of life is this? Is ridiculous. You're such an idiot, Craig. And so at what point does is the diminishing returns so far diminished that there's actually a negative to doing what you're doing? And so that is it with everything, that we just have to look at and run everything through the filter of, is this necessary or sufficient for success? Is it necessary or sufficient? Is it necessary for someone to exercise 1,000 days in a row in order to be fit and healthy and live a long life? No, absolutely not. And if you exercise 1,000 days in a row, is it sufficient? Well, it's actually can be deficient, and it can give you overuse injuries. I recently did this medical test. It's a Prenovo, is this company that does a full body MRI scan, and they look for cancer and all this sort of stuff. And they kick back this very detailed response to you. And I have degenerative joints in many parts of my body, probably because I've exercised too much in my life. So there are negatives to doing a lot of good things. You can have too much of a good thing. If you drink too much water, you can kill yourself. Everything's got too much.
So how do you break through your mind when you're, let's say, an addictive personality and a very disciplined person?
Mm.
How did you, I guess, learn to quit it? I guess you just saw some things, but I'm sure you still struggle with it if that's the kind of personality you have. Um, so, and systems and structures, like there's such a fine line between like for instance, every day I need to make phone calls to build my business. That's
Mhm.
discipline.
Mhm.
But where could something like that be a bad thing? I guess when your
Uh,
family's suffering for it, right? Like, I guess what you're kinda saying?
yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
so at one point there becomes like, how much money is too much money? Because if somebody is worth 100 million bucks and they're working 14 hours a day or even 10 hours a day, and they have a 2 hour round trip commute to the office, and their wife is going to walk out on them with the kids, like, what's $10 million can't buy that back. So you have to know your enough number, first of all. And it's not like, I'm not saying that you can't get richer and you can't get fitter and you can't compete in triathlons.
Mhm.
What I am saying is, first of all, know what matters, and then make sure that you do not sacrifice what truly matters to get something that doesn't matter in the end. And you can play the 85-year-old self game if you want. So if you fast forward to like your 85-year-old self sitting in your AI powered rocking chair when, in a few decades, what are you going to look back on your life and regret doing? Are you going to look back on your life and regret not getting from 100 million to 110 million? Or are you going to look back on your life and say, I really regret that my wife walked out on me with my kids? I think the answer is pretty obvious. And I'm hopefully like everybody who's listening to this is like, wow, I'm not in that situation. Good. I pray to God that you're not. I don't want anybody's wife to walk out on them with kids. And that's why I'm having this conversation, because we can do incredible stuff, but you can do incredible stuff and you can do it two ways. One, where you do incredible stuff and you actually sacrifice things, or you can do incredible stuff where you actually don't sacrifice the things. And that's why I bring up the story of Charlie Munger in the book, that Charlie Munger, would be laughed at by everybody who posts, cold plunges and stuff on the internet. But Charlie Munger had everything that a man could want in life: money, power, respect, wife, family, kids. He made billions of dollars. He made tens of thousands of people rich through Berkshire Hathaway. He mentored, at one point, the world's richest man. And he did not exercise a day after he left the army at age 18. What Charlie Munger did is that he knew his finish line and he ran his own race. And that's another main message of the book, is just because everybody's doing stuff on social media, and today, like, I click on a few videos of ice baths and now all I get is ice bath videos, and great, everybody's doing an ice bath, but an ice bath is neither necessary nor sufficient for success. And if it becomes a hindrance to you actually doing what matters, then an ice bath is actually negative. But Charlie never did an ice bath, and he was rich and he was well respected. In fact, he's like one of the most quoted business people of all time. But he didn't do things that other people did. In fact, he did the opposite. And I think that's what w- I'm challenging people to do here is do the hardest thing of all, which is think. First, understand your big why, then create a vision for your life, and then a specific definition of your success, and then build the blueprint to achieve that. And if running your own race means running absolutely against every single other person who's running in the opposite direction, so be it. You're running your own race, and that's the most important thing of all.
It's definitely a hard one. I'm very, very, very. That's why I was like, this has been an interesting book. I would say my biggest strength is I'm super disciplined, and so that's
But how do you
something.
define discipline? Like, what do you mean by disciplined? Because
If I,
everybody's got their own definition of it.
yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I just like I decide I'm doing something and I do not skip a day. Like
Mhm.
it's if I say I'm gonna, like I'm gonna. And it doesn't matter if I feel like it. Like I remember, I'm friends with Annie Frisella too, so obviously 75 hard.
Mhm.
And I remember doing that. And for me, it was phase two, and I ended up getting COVID, which here or there, I was really sick. Let's
Mhm.
put it that way. I was pretty sick. It really affected my MS. I could barely walk. And I ended up not being able to fly. Long story short, driving across country from Florida from an event back to Montana. It's crazy. And while doing 75 hard, while building my business, while being like it really flaring up my MS, while like and hence I got MS because I really stressed myself to the point of an autoimmune. So like I see where this dark side goes.
Mhm.
Because I ran really, really hard until my body broke down. And so I still struggle with this. That's why I'm like, this is intriguing for me personally. That's why I like podcasts because I can rant about myself a little bit.
Sure, sure.
But for me personally, because I do struggle with this, I'm so driven and I'm so disciplined. And I believe if I miss a day, I've run my life almost like 75 hard. I
Mhm.
miss a day of calls, I've like totally ruined my business. Like that's how my mind works, which has kept me very disciplined and consistent, but normally at the expense of my health. And so when you say that, like I totally resonate with this. It's just hard to shut off. It's really hard to shut off.
Yeah,
Like
so it's
if
this
you're that
fine line.
person.
Yeah, it's this fine line, and I mean, I still like the way that I live my life is radical compared to most people. That I get up at 3.
Yeah,
Today I
you
got
have
up
a
at three
dedicated
eighteen.
life.
I
Mhm.
get up at 3:18 in the morning because I have 3 kids under 3.
I like us 3:18. Mine's 4:20.
Yeah, yeah, it's mine always used to be 3:57 AM, but now that I have 3 kids under 3, so, I generally get up when the kid our 6-month-old, he sleeps with us right now, and he's a little bit sick, so he woke me up around 3. I got him a bottle, helped my wife, and I have to go work because once 6 o'clock hits, it's chaos in this house. I got
Right.
a few hours, away, but it's generally chaos, and so I get up and I wrote about it in the Perfect Day Formula, and people would always say to me, like, "Oh, when you have kids, when you get married, you're not going to be able to do this." And sure enough, I found a woman who likes to go to bed as early as I do, and I sleep a little less than she does, so I get up and I still do my work in the morning. But I think one of the things that helped me through this was being a personal trainer and seeing all these people exercising in the gym and some of them having very compulsive exercise habits, but not getting anywhere. And it made me think because my first business was based on a very contrarian principle, which was you don't have to do cardio in order to lose weight. And this was, in 2000, before CrossFit became popular. No one thought that was true. Everyone thought you had to go to the gym and do 6 or 9 hours of cardio per week in order to lose weight. And I came out and had this program. And that was one of the things about my success is I'm always trying to say something that's the opposite. I find that, well, I'm not trying to always say when I believe something
Right.
deep that is the opposite, then I know that I'm onto something, which is my morning routine approach is the opposite of morning miracle. My fitness approach was the opposite of the common sense back then. And so what I would see is all these people doing 6 or 9 hours of cardio and getting no results. And I just, I had to train them and I had to train them to dial it back. And, so it was like from 9 hours this week, well, let's go 8.5 hours next week because otherwise they're going to hit the panic button. And you start to dial things back. And this is the 80-20 principle, which is you start to get to a point where it's like, here's the minimal effective dose and here's the maximal effective dose. And any more than that is diminishing returns. And it actually leads to body breaking down, whether it's degenerative joints or some other type of issue. And we just don't need to do more in most cases. And so for me, as someone who, I used to be first one in, last one out. I used to live in Denver and have an office, and all of our employees lived outside because Denver got really expensive for homes and rent. So they lived outside the city. And so the first one got to the office at 6. So I had to beat that person to the office because I want to be first one in, last one out, and show everybody, the boss is really dedicated. And then the last person went to the office at 6:30. And so I'm in the office from 6 a.m. to 6:30, meaning I'm training in the gym at 4 a.m. till 5. Then I work from 5 until 6. Then I go to the office to beat the first person there. Then I'm there all day long. And then I leave. And how am I supposed to have this social life to go and meet my wife? So it was a ridiculous thing that I did. So I had to, once I got married, I couldn't live like that anymore. And so it all goes back to the thinking part. The big why, I do everything for my family. And so if that means these days I work out 3 times per week for 30 minutes because I'm getting my my minimal effective dose, and I'm not missing a bedtime with the kids, and I'm not missing a breakfast with the kids, and because I'm an old father and I'm waited this long to have kids, I'm not missing out on any of it. So I'm doing all the story times. I'm putting the kids to bed, and that's more important. As much as I want to go and train 4 times per week, like I did when I was 28 and 194 pounds, I could bench press 315. I can't do that anymore. And I just have to be okay with it. And so can I still get great results? Yes, by getting smarter about what I'm doing. And so going back and figuring out what matters is the key component to all of this. And then we run our own race. And then we figure out, as Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy said in their book of a great name, who, not how. I can't be the only one who does everything in the business. I got to figure out how I can get other who's doing the things in my business. And, maybe there are certain things you can't do. I mean, I can't put other people on somebody's podcast. It has to be me. And there are certain sales calls and calls that you have to do that only you can do. But we must be ruthless about everything else. How ruthless can we get with administrative work and paperwork and all the other stuff, even maybe client onboarding calls or whatever it is? It's getting massive, massive amounts of delegation so that some of the pressure is taken off of us. Because, the 5 words that will literally kill an entrepreneur is, I will do it myself. And if that's what we're saying for, it'll take me too long to train somebody, or, the clients only will accept me. It's not true in most cases, because no matter what industry you're in, somebody has built a bigger business of the same business that you run without doing as much work as you're doing. And so we just have to go back and rethink everything that we truly believe. We must challenge constantly, and then that'll lead us to breakthroughs.
So good. Lots to think about there. I love it. Where do you see yourself going in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your vision for your coaching and life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the way that I designed my coaching was I want to bring on more coaches. So we have additional coaches in our program. It used to be just me. And then I brought on one gentleman who's the co-author of my book, Daniel Woodrum. And he's the head coach of our program. And now we have additional coaches. We like to call them they all are like Marvel superheroes, because we have a specialist in this, a specialist in mindset, who's from Winnipeg of all places. We have a specialist in AI marketing. He's from California. We have a specialist in, general brick and mortar business specialist. She's from Maryland. And so we have this team of coaches that do one-on-one. Plus we have our big group high level program, which Anne is in, our mastermind program. And it's just expansion of that mastermind, expansion of that one-on-one. They're really using my principles, but they're actually better coaches and everything else than I am. But they're using my principles and systems that anybody can teach. And so we want to expand that. And then I brought on Daniel as a co-author for a couple of reasons. One, the third part of the book is all his genius, but also because I want him, he's a much better coach, much better leader than I am. I want him to help expand the business. And we want to have something, it's kind of like Tony Robbins coaching in that, there's Tony Robbins certified coaches, but
Yep.
that's life coaching. We want to have that level of coaching, taking these systems to people. So it's what the way that I describe what we do is, you're probably familiar with EOS, entrepreneurial operating systems. Are you
Yep.
familiar with that one? It's what we do is kind of similar, but it's really for the individual. EOS is for the organization, but what we do is for the individual. And the individual needs it even more than the organization, because you can't run an organized organization if you yourself are not organized in the first place. So we're helping people build the systems. And, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about the effortless discipline systems, but I believe that there's really three components to helping anybody kick a bad habit quite simply and put in place good habits. And that really is elimination, preparation, and connection. So elimination is getting rid of all the cues and the toxic environments and possibly the toxic people that drag you down. Once you get rid of those things, you then do better planning and preparation to grease the groove, to do the good behavior easier. And then the connection is accountability to somebody you deeply do not want to disappoint. You're part of very powerful groups, and you know that when you say something to people in that group, that you're not going to let them down. And that's what's missing from most people's lives. Well, first of all, you got to give them feedback. So, hey, like, let's, make sure you got the right goal here. But once you got the right goal and you tell somebody you're going to achieve it and you don't want to let that person down, then, everyone's going to be like you driving cross country. They're not going to miss, they're not going to stop. They're not going to miss out on the thing that they're supposed to be doing because they said they were doing it. And that integrity is a missing component, and it will help you move mountains in your life.
Okay. I love this. I know we could go forever, but I always have 3 questions that I always go through before we wrap up, and then anything we didn't touch on. And guys, everything's going to be in the show notes. Check out these books. Check out Craig. All the things. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. Reach out to him. He's super approachable. I'm really grateful for having him on this podcast. So 3 final questions. Number 1 is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
One sentence, find your purpose. That's a great question. Man, you just have to, you just have to dig deep into what drives you. And man, this is not, I don't have a good answer for this.
Good.
I've always found that, like, I can never help somebody find it. Like, you just have to figure it out on your own, because it's from your heart and your mind, and it's there for sure, but you're going to have to spend a lot more time on your own thinking and self-reflection and introspection, which most people avoid because it's one of the hardest things to do.
Makes sense. Second question, what's a favorite quote and why?
Oh, I've got so many. I would say one of my new favorite ones from that we put in the book was that the proactive person is always preparing, and the reactive person is always repairing. And that comes from John C. Maxwell. And the reason why I like it is because if the thinking person's approach to discipline is knowing the big why and what matters and their own race, the reactive person is going on social media. They're already disciplined. They already go to the gym and do all this stuff. And then they open up social media and they see, oh, but this person's gone to all the continents, and like, I got to go to all the continents. They're just reactive to, like, whatever is the flavor of the day for dopamine hits, and they're just going to ruin their life and have to repair a whole bunch of stuff. So that's why it really resonated with me.
Good one. And third and final question, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Um, I would say dad. Like, to me, my kids are just everything. So as long as it says dad on there, hopefully it says great dad, but just dad is the most important thing.
Cool. I love that. All right, run into someone in a coffee shop. They're like, that was great. We learned a lot. It was a lot of information. What's something we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
Something that we didn't touch on is we have this phrase in the book that standards eat discipline for breakfast. And so everybody thinks that discipline is the thing, but discipline is actually supported first by systems, then by identity change. And so James Clear's Atomic Habits, the greatest thing out of that book that he brought to the personal development world was that you have to change your identity. But then even stronger than identity are the high standards that you set for yourself. And when you get to the point of having high standards, you don't actually have to have discipline. And this, it's like, what does that even mean? Well, if the thing that matters to me is that I want to be a, an amazing father to my kids, it doesn't take discipline for me to get up at 3:30 in the morning and go to work to support them. There's no discipline. Like I'm happy as heck to do it. And so I've replaced the need for discipline with the desire to live according to high standards. And when you do that, now you're playing at the highest level of the game.
So good. I love this. Guys, I'm sure you're gonna share this. Everyone could use this. So make sure to share it. If we go out there and we help one person or one starfish at a time, together, we can change the world. Thanks so
Hey,
much for being
wait,
on.
I'm sorry, I'm totally ruining your
Okay.
end, but can I
That's
tell a
okay.
starfish story?
Yeah, I'd love a starfish story.
Okay, so when I lived in Denver, um, my business partner at the time, he was really into this thing called Toys for Tots. It's a Marine Corps charity drive. And for 5 years in a row, we had kind of like a mastermind event in Denver, Colorado in the first week of December. And all these entrepreneurs came in. There was like 50, I think one year we had almost 100 of them. And they came in, and the Friday we did this business event, so there's value to them, then a social, and then Saturday, we took 3 buses to various Walmarts in Denver, Colorado, and we had to call them in advance because, they had to have separate checkouts for us, and they had to be, like, ready to refill all the toys because we bought so much, and so because the one year we did it and they were not prepared. And so we took 3 buses of very successful entrepreneurs to Walmart's, and we bought $150,000 worth of toys collectively for the Marine Corps Toys for Tots Drive. And I was in charge of, we would meet in the Four Seasons lobby in Denver, and I was in charge of like getting everybody excited about the day. And I told the starfish story about, there's this little girl walking down the beach, and she's throwing the starfish in one at a time, and some old guy comes and says, um, what are you doing? You're not going to be able to help all of them. But she goes, I can help this one. And I said, you may never meet somebody who uses this Toys for Tots program, but I know that when you think you're done, because these guys were paying like they were spending like $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 of their own money, filling up shopping carts and just donating it. And I was like, you probably have a budget. Maybe you have 3,000, maybe it's 5,000, but just one more, to channel Ed Milet, just buy one more, and just like that starfish story. And I had so many people come up to me after and say, "Hey, like, I was planning on just spending 3,000. I spent 5,000, and that was the record year." But when you mentioned the starfish story, I was like, "Oh, I got to tell that before we go."
That's so cool. Guys, I hope you stuck to the end and you heard the story because the story was great. It was worth it. So go out there and get one more, help one more starfish or one more person because that's how we can change the world. Thanks so much for being on, Craig. Really appreciate it.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you.